This is Michael Straker from the User Experience Group here at Cardinal Path. And welcome to the fourth of our continuing series on online persuasion. If you missed the previous webinars, don't worry. Each webinar is completely independent. You don't need to have seen the previous ones to make sense of this one. And all the other ones are archived on our website, so you can view them there at any time. Today we're going to be covering the principle of reciprocation as well as its dark side, revenge. So let's get started. What is reciprocation? What are we talking about here? One sec. When someone gives us something or does us a favor, we feel an obligation to reciprocate by giving back. Now, this is an automatic response. It's part of our social evolution. When we're living in tribes or whatever as hunters and gatherers, mutual sharing was necessary for survival. And it's evolved that it's now automatic. It's an unwritten social contract, and it's very hard to resist. When someone does us a favor, we get a nagging feeling of obligation, a sort of need to even it out. Think about it. Someone invites you for dinner. You feel an obligation to return the favor. Someone sends you an unexpected birthday gift or a card. When their birthday comes around, you're going to feel an obligation to do something. Someone does you a big favor at work, bails you out, and helps you meet a big deadline. If that person later asks you for a favor, you're going to feel obliged. It's hard to say no. So that's the crux. When someone does something for us, we owe them. And we say yes to those we owe. In fact, when you think about it, we have some really harsh words for those who don't reciprocate, for those who don't follow the rules. We call these people leeches, sponges, users, ingrates. There are really serious consequences to not following this social contract. You become a social pariah. This feeling of obligation, of course, it applies to individuals. You know, you cannot take without giving back, but it applies more than just to individuals. It applies to groups. Think of sports teams and companies, or even divisions within companies. As we'll see in a moment, it applies between countries. You know, and in the coming millennia, it'll probably apply to various worlds. In other words, it applies everywhere. This feeling of indebtedness, this desire to reciprocate, it lasts. It's not a fleeting thing. It can last for years, even decades, and it can actually be handed down through generations. Robert Cialdini, in his classic book, Influence, gives a really good example. When Mexico City was hit by a big earthquake in 1985, Ethiopia sent $5,000 in relief money. Now, that's not a large sum of money by international standards, but this is Ethiopia, one of the poorest, most ravaged nations in the world. Starvation and despair is rampant, and they donated cash to a country halfway around the world? Why? Do these nations share a similar heritage, shared beliefs, a shared language and religion? Mexico and Ethiopia? Hardly. The reason for the donation was because in 1935, that's 50 years earlier, Ethiopia was invaded by Italy. Mexico sent aid to Ethiopia. Reciprocation. Ethiopia felt indebted. They had to return the favor, even 50 years later. As a Canadian, there's another example that hits closer to home for me, and it's the extraordinary relationship between the Canadians and the Dutch. Seems like a random connection. Canadians and Dutch, what do they have in common? But a Canadian traveling in Holland is likely to be received very warmly, more so than most other foreigners. Why? It's because in World War II, the Canadians played a lead in driving the Nazis out of Holland. A lot of Canadians were killed in doing so. The Canadians treated the Dutch really well. They ate less so that they could share their food with the Dutch. They helped rebuild the country. They allowed the Dutch royal family to live in exile in Canada. The Dutch have never forgotten this. Now, at the time this happened, of course, I wasn't even born, and nor were most of the Dutch people that I'd meet if I were to visit Holland. But to this day, that special bond exists. This 66-year-old feeling of indebtedness still warms relations between the Canadians and the Dutch. It's reciprocation across generations. Well, you might think, oh, that's very interesting, but how can we use this principle in marketing? Well, let's look at the Easter Seals War Amps type campaigns. When they send out flyers asking for donations, they typically get about an 18% response rate. But what happens when they throw in a little gift and they include free individualized address labels? What happens? Donations double. See, we've been given a personalized gift. We didn't ask for it. We may not even want it, but we still feel indebted. Remember in the old days, the Hare Krishnas used to hang out at the airport handing out flowers and then asking for donations. You didn't want the flower, you didn't ask for it, but they stuff it in your hand and then ask for a donation. A lot of people just grumbling will reach in their pocket and give a donation. They feel indebted. Well, how can this apply online? Let's take a look. OpenOffice.org. They offer free software downloads, and then they gently ask for donations. Please contribute. You can help. Looking for feedback, joining mailing lists, donating whatever. They're so nice about it, so generous that you really do feel like you should give something back. They're invoking reciprocation. Okay, now you might be asking, but I don't have anything I can give away. I don't have software. How can I use this principle? Well, one great thing is, if you can't make a gift, just putting in an effort works. Here's what I mean. In an experiment by Goldstein and Cialdini, subjects were given a paper survey and were simply asked, please fill this out. 34% responded. But when the experimenter put a handwritten sticky note on the survey, hey, Bob, would you mind filling this out, please? What do you think happened? The response rate doubled. Take the effort to add a handwritten request, and you'll get a much better response. Another great example of putting in an effort, done by the same guys, Goldstein and Cialdini, they did an experiment with waiters in a restaurant. In the first scenario, waiters were given a free mint, gave away a free mint with the check, and this resulted in a 3% increase in tips. So they have this one mint it's a gift, but it's kind of expected. When they gave 2 free mints, which is more than expected, there was a 14% increase in tips. But get this, when waiters gave one mint, and then returned just to add a second mint, i.e., when they obviously went to an extra effort, tips increased by 23%. So the bottom line, if you want to invoke reciprocation, but you can't give anything away or do any favors, show that you've gone to some trouble. That alone can invoke the nagging feeling of indebtedness. When dealing with potential clients, personalize your communications as much as possible. Even think about sending handwritten letters or postcards. In this day and age, it's really rare to get such things. So you'd really stand out, and it shows that you've put in an extra effort. That leads to a feeling of indebtedness, making it that much harder to say no. Let's explore whether it's better to make a conditional gift or just an outright gift. Is a gift conditional, or is it just an outright, here you go? This first experiment was done in a hotel, and cards were placed in the rooms asking guests to please reuse their towels. There were 2 different messages. The first was a conditional offer. If you reuse your towel, we'll make a charitable donation on your behalf. How do you think this performed? No effect at all. With the conditional offer, there was no increase in the number of people agreeing to reuse their towels. The second message was a completed gift. It read, we have made a charitable donation on your behalf. Please reuse your towel. How did this message do, the completed gift? It boosted responses by 45%. We have already made the gift. That invokes reciprocation, a feeling of indebtedness. Well, this is in hotels. Can it work online? You bet. Let's look at a recent study from Italy comparing reciprocity to reward. Now, this study was done on an Italian website that gives visitors technical information in Italian. What the site owners want in return is marketing information. They want the visitors' personal information and feedback. In other words, they want them to fill out a form. So here's the question. Is it better, and it's a question a lot of us face, is it better to force visitors to fill out a form, that is, to make a conditional offer? If you fill this out, we'll give you the information. Or is it better to invoke reciprocity? Just give them the information and then ask them nicely if they'd please fill out the form. Let's see what happened in the study. Well, on the face of it, the conditional gift appeared to work a little better. If people were forced to fill out the form, more will do so. Here it was 84% for reward versus 72% for reciprocity. But, and there's a big but, and you can probably guess what it is. When we're forced to fill out a form, we'll only do the bare minimum. We'll answer fewer questions, probably only the mandatory ones, and the quality of the information will be much worse. We'll often provide bogus or incomplete answers. So you force people to fill out a form, you'll probably get a higher response rate, but the quality and the completeness will suffer. So if you want quality information, and who doesn't, reciprocation may work better for you. It's another interesting point. And it's another thing to keep in mind if you want to invoke reciprocation, but you aren't in a position to offer a gift or do a favor. Accepting a no or making a concession is a kind of gift. Let me explain. Let's say you're trying to get volunteers to work with troubled teens. Specifically, you want people to chaperone a group of young offenders to the zoo. First, let's see what happens if you simply ask for what you want. This was scenario A in this experiment from the 70s, which explains the sort of politically incorrect language. Experiment from the 70s. The experimenters simply asked, are you willing to chaperone a group of juvenile delinquents to the zoo? Well, 17%, surprisingly, 17% said yes, which of course means 83% said no. But then they tried a different approach. Under scenario B, they first asked for something bigger, more than what they really wanted. They first asked, would you spend 2 hours a week as a team counselor for a minimum of 2 years? Yikes. Nobody said yes. Nobody said yes. 100% said no. Then what happened? The experimenters accepted the no and then made their original request as before, but now it seems like a concession. Are you willing to chaperone a group of juvenile delinquents to the zoo? Well, what happens now? Remember that when we asked the question first, only 17% said yes. Well, under scenario B, that skyrockets to 50% saying yes. The rate went from 17% to 50%, yet we were asking the same thing. The only difference is that in scenario B, we first asked for something much bigger. We accepted the no, and then we made our real request. And this invoked a form of reciprocation. I've made a concession, now it's your turn. Rate went up to 50%. There's an important side effect here too, by the way. Not only will more people say yes under scenario B, but they're also more likely to show up, and they're more likely to volunteer again. Why? Feeling of indebtedness. I feel bad that I couldn't agree to make that 2-year commitment to act as a team counselor, so I'll make doubly sure I show up for the zoo thing. Let me give you an everyday example of making a concession and how it works. Say a kid wants $5 from his dad, and he knows from experience that if he just asks his dad for $5, there's a good chance his dad is going to say no. So he's a smart kid. What does he do instead? He says, Dad, can I have $50? No. Okay, can I have $5? Yeah, okay. Accepting the no and making a concession is kind of a gift or a favor. So Dad says yes to the smaller request. He might otherwise have said no. It's sort of a combination of the contrast principle, which we talked about in a previous webinar, plus reciprocation. In contrast to the big request, the watered down request, which is what we really wanted after all in the first place, the concession, it seems more reasonable. Plus, on top of that, we feel indebted. So let's just sum up. How can we use reciprocation in the business world? Well, first, learn to make gifts. Do your customers a favor. Give them something of value. You might want to go to YouTube and research, just do a search on Cialdini reciprocation, and you'll find a great little video. He suggested in a networking situation, say you're in a room with a bunch of prospects, don't ask who can be of help to me. Rather ask, who can I help? Whose business interests can I advance and how? If you have an easy way of helping someone out, be it a free sample, a referral, a valuable piece of advice, give it to them. When someone gives us something, we owe them, and we tend to say yes to those we're indebted to. See, if someone does us a favor, it's hard to turn them down, so do people favors. If you can't make a gift, if there is nothing you can do for your prospects, no gift or favor, then put in an obvious effort. Customize things. Try creative handwritten notes, etc. Look like you've gone to some effort. Third, consider the concession technique. Remember that accepting a no is kind of a gift, a favor. So if appropriate, ask for more than what you really want. Then, once refused, make your real request. Well, that's reciprocation. I'd now like to kind of take a look at the dark side of reciprocation. I want to look at revenge. So what is revenge all about anyway? Well, when we're treated unfairly, we get angry. But we will go to great lengths, often irrational lengths, to get even. Dan Ariely, in The Upside of Irrationality, describes a series of experiments he calls the trust game. Now, there are a whole bunch of different versions of this, but one version goes like this. There are two players, and they're kept separate. They don't actually see each other. They don't interact with each other. They're separated. Player A receives $10 and is offered a choice. He can either just leave with the $10, he can keep it and go, and that's the end of it, or he can give that $10 to player B. Player A is told, if you give this $10 to player B, the amount will quadruple to $40, and then player B will be given a choice. He can either just leave with the $40, or he can split it. He can give $20 to player A. So you see, if both players are told all of this in advance, okay? So it's a game of mutual trust. Both sides can come out ahead as long as they both do the right thing. And as it turns out, quite a few player A's will trust player B and give them the $10. And often player B will reciprocate and split that $40. But sometimes player B doesn't cooperate. Sometimes player B will simply leave with the $40. And here's where things get really interesting. I want you to put yourself in the position of player A. You're given this $10 and you could just leave with it. You could have left with it. But you decided to trust player B. You gave him the $10, assuming he'd do the right thing and give you $20 back. But you've been betrayed. He left with the $40. How do you feel? Well, like I said, here's where it gets interesting. Because if player B betrays player A, if player B doesn't share like player A did, then player A is advised of a further choice. He's told that the experimenter can retrieve money from player B. And he's told, for every $1 you give me, I'll retrieve $2 from player B. Now I want you to note that any money retrieved stays with the experimenter. Player A can't get the money back. But if he's willing to reach into his own pocket, he can make sure that player B loses it. It is pure revenge, and it's expensive revenge. You're digging into your own pocket with no chance of getting any money back for no reason other than to punish player B. So taking this option may not be strictly rational in a way because there's no chance of a payoff. You've lost the money. You're certain to lose more. But it turns out that revenge feels good. Getting revenge actually activates the pleasure center of the brain. It's very rewarding. And people will pay for that wonderful feeling. Even though there's no monetary gain for them, they'll pay for that wonderful feeling. So when player A's are betrayed, lots of them did, in fact, reach into their pockets and pay for revenge. Let's just take a couple look at a couple real-life examples of revenge and how it works. This is great. Two business travelers, they had had guaranteed reservations, so-called, at Houston's DoubleTree Club Hotel. When they arrived, they were told that the rooms would be given to other guests, and basically they were out of luck. Even worse, the check-in person on duty, Mike the night clerk, they called him, was really rude and unhelpful. Well, these travelers were so angry at their mistreatment that they decided to get even and seek revenge using nonviolent and legal means. What they did was they produced a PowerPoint presentation outlining their ordeal. And they sent this presentation to the front desk manager, the general manager, the hotel's owners. They sent it to their friends, their colleagues. They posted it on the internet where it went viral. And it was picked up by Dan Ariely, who uses this as an example in his book, The Upside of Irrationality. Just Google "very bad hotel Houston," and you'll have no trouble finding a copy of the presentation. I'll just go through a few of the slides just to give you a taste of what it's like. The next starts with the simple background facts: who they are, what happened, and the fact that they were denied rooms. They described their encounter with Mike the night clerk, noting that he was deeply unapologetic. And then it gets quite funny as they track the career of Mike the night clerk: 1985 paperboy, 1995 Subway sandwich maker, November 15th is the day of the incident, rude hotel clerk, 2004 McDonald's sandwich maker, 2014 septic tank cleaner. Then they outline how much revenue the hotel will lose as a result of the incident, how much they would have spent at this hotel had this not happened. They do this funny thing where they state the odds that they'll be returning to the hotel again compared with other unlikely events. For instance, the chance of the Earth being ejected from the solar system by the gravitational pull of a passing star is 1.2 million, and the chance of us returning to the DoubleTree Club Houston are worse than any of those. And what are the chances you'd save room for us anyway? They close by letting it be known that they'll be sharing this deck with everyone they can think of. Ah, revenge. Just think about it. One isolated incident of an employee slipping up, and how much damage was done. Well, now let me tell you my own personal example. Let me tell you about those lying hounds at the Bank of Montreal. When I was a university student in Toronto back in the 80s, the Bank of Montreal administered my student loans. Now, there was a branch right across the street. And every year I could just walk across the street and do my paperwork there. It took all of 5 minutes. Well, in my final year, I got a little letter. And the letter advised me that for my convenience, student loans would no longer be handled by the local branches. They were all going to be handled by a single branch. And where was this single branch located, do you think? Was it across the street? Was it downtown? Was it in some easy-to-access location right on a main subway line? Nah. It was in the middle of nowhere. And they have the gall to tell me they're doing this for my convenience. I used to be able to walk across the street. But now, to get to the single branch that handled all the student loans in Toronto, I had to take 3 buses and 2 trains each way. No lie. That's 3 buses and 2 trains each way to get to the middle of nowhere and back again. So that's 6 buses and 4 trains to get to where I used to have across the street from me. Now, if the bank had been honest and they just used sort of an apologetic tone and admitted that they were doing this to reduce their costs, I might have been a little miffed. Well, I would have been a little miffed, but I'd have accepted it and ultimately forgotten about it. But that shameless, blatant, outright lie that they were doing this for my convenience outraged me. I closed my account. I told everyone I knew about this, and I refused to do business with the Bank of Montreal for the next 25 years. Now think about that. A few ill-considered words in a form letter, and they lost my business, and presumably lots of other people's business too. I wasn't the only one pissed off by this letter. For 25 years. And here I still am, still exacting revenge by using them as an example. Why? Why do we have this powerful need to exact revenge? Well, really, there's a very good reason. Revenge actually serves a really important social function. You see, in the overall scheme of things, we must be able to rely on social contracts and conventions. To ensure these contracts work, they have to be enforced. So reciprocation is the carrot. If you act like a star, you'll get a reward. Revenge is the stick. Treat someone badly, and you'll be punished. Revenge is necessary. The threat of revenge is a great deterrent against bad behavior. It keeps us all in line. But you know, the really scary thing about revenge is that in business, we often don't know about it. It's something very real and very damaging, but it's impossible to measure. Okay, in the hotel example, the managers did know about it. But you know, in the Bank of Montreal example, nobody at the Bank of Montreal knew that I withheld my business for 25 years and that I'm telling all my friends all this story repeatedly. If you disappoint your customers, they'll take their revenge, but you may not know about it. Oh, they'll withhold their business, and they'll tell their friends, and they'll tell anyone who'll listen, but they may not bother to tell you. At best, they'll tell some random CSR who won't pass it up the chain. You could be losing business and not even know about it. A simple example, you get bad service in a restaurant. Now, some people will call the manager or owner over to complain, but you know, a lot of people won't. At best, they'll complain to the waiter, and the owner never knows about it. And a lot of customers won't even do that. They won't even complain to the waiter. They won't complain. They'll just never return. Their punishment is they never come back, and they tell all their friends how crappy this restaurant is. The owner loses business and doesn't even know about it. So no matter what business you're in, it's really important to treat customers well. Remember how insanely motivated people are to exact revenge you may never, ever learn about. The only solution, give them no reason to seek revenge. So just a quick overall recap. To invoke reciprocation, do your customers a favor. Give them something of value. If you can't make a gift, at least put in an obvious effort. Make it obvious that you went to a lot of trouble. That'll invoke reciprocation too. Consider asking for more than you really want, and then once refused, make your intended request. But beware, reciprocation works in reverse too. Revenge. As a species, we're very appreciative of favors, but we're very, very vindictive when slighted. So that's my quick introduction to reciprocation and revenge. You can see the mailing list here. I've gone through it 3 times before, so I won't go through the whole thing again. I'll just point out a couple of the main things. Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, is the best book on the subject of persuasion generally. If you can only read one book, that's the one to read. Also, this second book, Noah Goldstein, Steve J. Martin, and Robert Cialdini, Yes, 50 Scientifically Proven Ways to Be Persuasive. Excellent book. Lots of examples in this webinar come from this book. And Dan Ariely's second book, The Upside of Irrationality, The Unexpected Benefits of Defying logic at work and at home. Lots of great examples of revenge in that book. So thanks for showing up. or if you're watching the archive version, thanks for tuning in. Please check out our webinars. They're all archived on the Cardinal Path website. So we'll see you next time when we'll discuss commitment and consistency. We haven't set a date yet, but stay tuned. And until then, this is Michael Straker saying ciao for now.